Hey guys, Jeremy here with Simple Little Life and welcome to another edition of Tool Time Tuesday. I apologize for no video last week. I was getting ready to film Tool Time Tuesday on Tuesday and I got a call from my neighbor asking if I could help him do some baling. And then Wednesday I got a call from him again saying, can you do some more baling? And then Thursday he didn't need any help baling, but his hay truck broke down, his bale truck, and so he called me up and I had to drive one of my other tractors a couple miles over that way and like lift the arm of the bale truck and then chain it up so he could drive it home so he could fix it. So last week was a complete write-off for me, and then Friday I was volunteering to build a playground, which was ridiculous. Like snow, like old man winter fully showed up. So last week was just like a gong show and I didn't get to do any of my work last week. No knife orders, no sanding block order. Everything was just helping out people around me, which is good. It's good to do those things sometimes, but it's nice to actually be able to get this video shot today. So this week for Tool Time Tuesday, it's a fairly basic rudimentary tool we're going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about angle grinders. Now, if you're just getting into knife making or metal fabrication, probably one of the best tools you can buy, the most versatile, is a angle grinder. You can do so much with it, from cutting your materials, cutting up your steel, grinding your welds down, shaping the steel, and then finishing it all. I mean, every welder knows that angle grinders, you need to have a few of them when you're doing metal fabrication. So I'll show you a few different options for angle grinders, and we're going to talk angle grinder safety. Let's do the safety stuff first. The most important thing with an angle grinder, in my opinion, is matching the RPM of the disc that you're going to put on to the RPM of the grinder. And that's not to say it has to match, but your grinder will have its operating RPM. So if it's 10,000 RPM and you put a grinding disc on that says maximum 7,000 RPM, you're asking for troubles. That grinding disc was not designed to run that fast, and it could just go in your face. Everyone's different, so be sure when you're buying your grinding discs that you match the speed. Make sure the speed they are designed to run at is a higher speed than the actual speed of your angle grinder. Probably number one most important rule with angle grinders. The second one, in my opinion, is hand protection. Wear gloves when you're on an angle grinder. So many people on YouTube do not wear gloves, and I think it's insane. I've cut myself to the bone with an angle grinder before, and it doesn't feel very good. You definitely want to wear gloves. The third safety tip I would recommend is to use the guards. However, I'm totally guilty of not keeping the guards on my grinder. So yeah, they have to be sold with a guard, and you should use a guard. It's very important to have a guard. But for sometimes it really makes it difficult to get in places. But I have grinders that I do not want guards on, and that's a risk that I'm taking. So as far as a safety standpoint and saying, well, what's the proper way to operate this, keep your guards on. Anyways, let's just take a look at a couple different grinders that I have and some of the stones or cutting apparatuses you can get for them. Okay, so for some of these Tool Time Tuesdays, I'm thinking about switching up to the GoPro. I think it might make it easier for some of the stuff we're doing. But real quickly, I'll show you a few different features on some different grinders. I've got 4 different grinders here. Craftsman, pretty much junk. Makita, probably in my mind, one of the best angle grinders you can buy is a Makita. DeWalt, they're okay. They're not bad, but not as good as a Makita as far as long-term use goes. Anyways, here's a very important piece of information on a grinder. This will have your RPM. This one, for example, runs at 10,000 RPM. This one runs at 11,000 RPM. The DeWalt also runs at 11,000 RPM. So, very important to know, if I've got a grinding disc that's rated for 10,000 RPM, be safe to run it on this one, not safe to run it on this one, or this one. A few different options for things you can do. I get a lot of questions about these discs that I use. These are Walter Zip Cuts. These things are the best. Let's just take a look here. For example, this one's rated for 12,200 RPM. Safe to run on all these grinders. Important thing when you're using zip cuts, these are not grinding discs. The only place you ever want contacting your metal is this surface right here. Never ever put one of these in and start grinding on the sides of it. You'll cut that down, that thing will fly apart. The danger with grinders is their RPM. They're running so fast, and it gets really ugly really quick. I worked at a shop once, and there's a guy who was grinding improperly on a big cutoff wheel, and he ended up sending that wheel. It exploded on him, and it went into the roof, and it actually stuck into the drywall in the ceiling over his welding bench, and we left that there. He wanted to take it down, but the boss said, you know what, that's going to stay there as a reminder to all of us, you know, what can happen. Luckily, he didn't get hurt, but really, it was just ugly, 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 ugly. Probably another one of the most common uses for an angle grinder is a grinding stone. This one here is a cling spore. These you can certainly grind on this side, so you can you know, knock down your welds or smooth out material, shape material. You can do that all day long safely with these. Here's an example. This is one of the ones I use with the guard. Most of these guards are quick release of the bigger ones, like if you get Makita's or DeWalt's or some of the bigger companies. And that's kind of nice because, you know, if you say you need access to a certain part of a piece of metal, you can just loosen that off, slide it around, and you're good to go. And then we've got our protection there. Now, the minimum in Canada, the protection required is 130 degrees by law. This one is 180 degrees there. This is another type of pad you can get. This is what I call those surface conditioning pads. It's like a Scotch-Brite, and this one just kind of has a hook loop fastener system, and it just kind of squishes on like that. This is excellent for removing rust and really putting a really nice smooth finish on your metal. These things work really well. And the third type of disc that I commonly use are these sanding discs. These ones have a special backing pad, and again, this backing pad is even rated. So this one's rated for 12,000 RPM, 11,000 is the fastest in my grinders, so this is safe across all my grinders. This one's a cling spore, and one thing you need to keep care of is make sure you have the proper nuts for your grinders, because there's so many different options. One trick that you can usually do with most grinders is when you're loosening them off, you don't need the wrench that they come with. Unplug it, make sure it's not going to turn on you. And they all have this little lock, and that's a pin that just kind of goes into one of the shafts or turning parts. It just locks your spindle from spinning, and you can just take your hand and just loosen these off. Just undo them, and you're good to go. One quick tip while I have these here, sometimes it's a pain in the butt to store grinders with the cords everywhere, and this is a way, I mean, this is a small detail, but this is something I've done for years and years and years, and I absolutely really like it. So, to store my grinders, a lot of guys will wrap them all around like that. You get a lot of really tight, it kind of kinks up your hose after a while. One thing that I found that works really well, it works whether you have a handle on your grinder or not. I simply will take it and I'll just do figure eights, because then you're never getting a really tight wrap. When I get to the end, I do one loop like that, put it through like that, and that thing is good to go. You can throw this in the toolbox in the back of your truck. I've flown with these grinders. I used to travel all over the US putting in airport baggage conveyors, and I carried angle grinders with me more than any other tool because I use them all the time, trimming out stainless steel and stuff like that. So this is a great way to store them, easy to get at, quick to undo, and you don't get all those weird little kinks if you were to just wrap it around. So one little tip. And then I'm not too sure what else we can talk about with the grinders. Some have handles, some don't. I like my cutting discs to have handles because I can hold on to them like this. And one thing that's quite important when you're grinding is that always ask yourself, if this were to blow up, where's it going to go? You know, I'll kind of keep it offset from where my head is at. If this thing comes off, I don't want it going into my face. One other thing I want to talk about that kind of differences in the grinders is the type of switches they have. This Makita here has a switch like this, so you can either jog it momentarily or you can lock it down. I really like this feature if you're doing a lot of grinding, but you always need to be careful that you never store it with this turned on, and also that when you go to plug it in, you always check to see the state of that switch, because if I were to just leave that there, plug it in, the grinder's going to start up and it's not shutting off anytime soon. So you're going to have a grinder driving itself all over the place, and who knows what or who you could damage. This one is the same way. I can turn this on and turn it off, and it's also got the momentary contacts. And then there's also with this DeWalt, this trigger type, it's got a little safety mechanism there, so you do need to just grab that and then you can bump it. That's just so you don't accidentally bump it. You know, if you're walking by it or something like that, won't turn the trigger on, and hold it like that. Now this one you do have to hold it down. There's no lock on this trigger, so if you got a lot of grinding to do, it can actually start to fatigue your hands. That's why I do kind of like these. And this is pretty much reserved just for like super heavy jobs, is these bigger ones. This is a 7-inch angle grinder. These are all typically either 4.5 or 5-inch angle grinders. Now this is huge. This is for heavy commercial applications, and most, you know, if you're getting into knife making or metal fabrication at your garage, you really do not need to look at something like this. But I mean, I have one, I've had one for years, and The one thing to take note between the big grinders and the small grinders is that the big ones will always run slower. This one is 6,000 RPM, so very dangerous if I were to take the cutting discs from this and try to retrofit them to work on a smaller grinder. Like, this is good for cutting large angle iron, steel tubing, stuff like that. If you have heavy grinding to do, you can use this. One thing to keep in mind though, these big ones are very heavy and they get cumbersome quite quickly. That's a lot of weight that you're holding and you're supporting. There's a quick look at different types of angle grinders. And a few other options for the type of stones that you can use. This one here, can't use this. There's a common mistake people will get these. These are meant to be mounted in drills. If you look at the RPM there, max RPM 3,750. These wire bristles fly out like crazy if you put these on an angle grinder. I know from experience it happens. Don't ever put one of these that's rated to be used in a drill or something like that on an angle grinder. It's like you met a porcupine. Another type of stone that I really like are these little ones. Really good for enlarging holes, and these typically are great for flat work, and these are for more like contoured work and stuff like that. They had a bunch of these that they gave us to try out at work, and that's where I have it from. I've never actually found a place to buy these. I don't use them all that much, but on a recent project I did end up using this, and I had to enlarge some holes. I didn't have a hole saw big enough, so I drilled a smaller one and made the holes bigger with this. Worked really well. And then you can also get things like this, and I actually got this from my uncle. I have never used it though, and I don't know if I'm ever going to. I don't know. I guess if I ever decide to carve something out of wood or something like that, it might be handy to have. But this one here is rated, it says, for 14,000 RPM. But just the idea of this spinning that fast on my angle grinder, it really freaks me out. So this is just kind of to show you there's a lot of different things you can get, a lot of attachments. You can make your angle grinder do all sorts of stuff. Another thing you're just going to want to make sure is you have all the right little accoutrements to go with it. Different types of nuts and spacers, and there's so many different combinations that, I've got a small little box in the drawer where I keep all my cutoff discs and stuff of just a whole bunch of assortments of these, and it's amazing how handy they are. So don't ever try and just take a washer that's a little bit too big and make it work. That thing's going to take off, it's going to get an imbalance, and all of a sudden you're going to have the shaking grinder in your hand. So grinders are dangerous. The biggest thing with them is use some common sense, and super versatile tools. I've actually seen guys that make knives, and I've tried these with knife making before. They'll clamp their grinder in a vise, and then just pretend, for instance, this was my blade. Let it run, and they'll actually put the bevel on their blade like that. And honestly, that's not a bad idea. So that's this week's edition of Tool Time Tuesday, and for all those that have requested the angle grinder stuff, hopefully this gives you some of the information you were looking for. There's not a lot to these things, but really watch your RPMs. Make sure that what you're going to put on the grinder is rated for the speed your grinder can run at. Number one, most important rule. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Tool Time Tuesday. Cheers.